All right. Well, hello on this less than terribly hot day in North Carolina. Nice little breeze coming through with an assist from a fan. I've been watching catbirds out here eating cat food all morning and most of the afternoon. I'm hoping I can train these new ones because I know there's a baby. I saw one feeding another one that was a little ill-mannered. The mama was feeding the younger one and it was being a little pushy about wanting to eat. But I'm hoping we can train these guys up like we've done in past years to come when we whistle. Because catbirds, they do like cat food. And sometimes they sound like a cat's cry or a cat's chirp. Oh, there's one looking at me. Probably heard me talking about it. But anyways, this is called Finding Oneself in a Pointy Land. And what I'm reflecting on is one album from a short album. It's more of an EP that the guitarist Robt Fripp produced with some other players when he had come to the United States in the late 70s after working with Peter Gabriel. And this is going to sound corny, but he actually, in my opinion, found his groove again. Okay? I don't really know where Fripp found his groove for the original, the first King Crimson records, up to and including the last things he did before moving to the United States. And before moving to the United States, he'd sat down with Brian Eno and learned how to hook up reel-to-reel tape players and get some very, very cool layering effects. I presume Eno got it from that group of composers, Steve Reich, Philip Glass, what's Riley's first name? But those guys were doing that kind of stuff 10 years before Eno. And, we all stand on the shoulders of giants, and as I've said before, I believe that the one on the bottom is probably God. And creativity, you need a little bit of learning in order to create something. And so anyways, Fripp had reached a point where he was really, really adept with this looping technology, pre-digital looping technology, and he was taking it out and touring around record stores and stuff. And I know a few friends that actually were at a few of those shows back in the day, and they enjoyed it. It was weird. And people were kind of interested in how a rock star British guitarist, just like Hendrix and Clapton and Jeff Beck and all these other people, where people would carve out graffiti about the godhood of certain guitarists. Fripp was one of them. And he knew all those guys, right? And he made a clean break, after sitting there and sculpting that band into all sorts of different configurations for its first, 7 years, give or take. I think he just got tired of it. Okay, just like some people get tired of teaching elementary school. And he went into a period of study, and he would be the best person to listen to about that stuff. Studying the self, consciousness, and one's place in the greater creation is how I would put it. What I've read about Gurdjieff and those guys. Having real purpose in life. And Fripp came out of this clean break with the music industry with a simple portable technology, changed locations, crossed an ocean, settled down in New York City for a while, and started associating with some pretty interesting people in a locale that was, even though he toured the United States, you really have to live here. To really understand the granularity of how different we are in this country. I mean, some of us hate one another. And, he associated with Blondie. He associated with Daryl Hall from the pop group Hall & Oates. He associated with people in the punk community. I've heard him say that he was very fond of the band Television, right? Tom Verlaine and Richard Lloyd, Billy Ficca and Fred Smith. This interesting, I don't call them punk, it's amplified acoustic music by people that can play their instruments with incredible restraint and eye contact and almost telepathic interplay between the guitarists and stuff. I think when Fripp was drawn down into maybe CBGB's or one of those clubs and saw Television up there and saw how they were just completely creatively unfettered within the arrangements of their own songs, with an incredible level of musicianship and restraint, I think he started thinking, that might be kind of fun. That might be kind of fun. It might be kind of fun to play in 4/4, to play some waltzes, this non-complicated stuff, you know, pastoral 6/8 and stuff like that. And the work that Fripp put out after that, it seems to me, as he was rubbing elbows, doing some producing for people, appearing on some of the songs on the records that he produced, I saw a whole nother side of Robert Fripp from the side that had been introduced to me when I was a high school kid in the 70s. And as I've said before, there are a couple of Crimson records that I'm very, very fond of, and I know it seems very trite to say so, but Red, USA, Starless and Bible Black, those are my favorites from that first stretch of Crimson. And I've put a bunch of clips in here so you can just sort of hear what he sounded like in all of these different contexts. When I was a young folk singer in the late 70s myself, I landed on an album by these three sisters, R-O-C-H-E, it's pronounced Roach, Maggie, Terry, and Suzy, and they were a really, really intellectual and interesting and poetic in a real kind of Kerouac, Ferlinghetti, Ginsberg kind of way. Very, very American. And they were this acoustic group. Actually, Maggie and Terry had put out a duet record previously with a great song on it called West Virginia, one side of which was produced by Paul Simon, and the other side of which was produced by, I think, Paul Samuel Smith of the Yardbirds. So these people saw the talent in this group, and so too did Robert Fripp. And there was a song on that record, still is, look it up, called the Hammond Song. Oh my goodness, how lovely. It's got the lightest touches of what sound like Frippertronics and that beautiful, clean, round, oboe-like tone, or maybe bassoon-like tone that Fripp has been able to evoke for as long as I've been listening to him play. And it just fit right in there so nicely. It was lovely. It was a lovely song to begin with. His work producing the Peter Gabriel second album, which some people call Scratch. I think it, in some ways, and it fits in here really well because the recording of Phil Collins, the erroneous, weird recording of Phil Collins' snare drum, super gated, that became iconic afterwards with dance music all through the 80s. And still, I suppose. I'll bet you a lot of this digital gear's got that clipped snare in it. Well, where did that happen? I think it happened during the recording of Intruder on Peter Gabriel's second album. That was a Fripp production, that record. And oh my gosh, what a great sound. And we hear that kind of sound and you know, what you might call sort of incarnations of it, maybe not necessarily deliberate, all through dance music and all through the dance to math kind of music, as I call it, that Fripp was fixing to produce. And we can hear on, that's a good album, that Peter Gabriel album, on Daryl Hall's Sacred Songs record, which I believe is actually Fripp's earliest American production, because it was recorded in August of '77, which is the summer that I was fixing to start college. And it took a couple years to get released because the suits got all involved in a bunch of stupid stuff and caused it to delay. But the arc of these collaborations, it appears to me, is, Fripp was working with Gabriel on his first album and contributed some parts, and a very lovely side of him came out on the song Here Comes the Flood on that record. And he reiterated that song in a whole new and a very Spartan and stripped down minimalistic arrangement on his album, his solo record, his first solo record, which was called Exposure. And Exposure was the name of a Peter Gabriel song on the record that Fripp had worked on with him. So, 77, we've got the Daryl Hall record. And then in 78, we've got that second Gabriel record. Okay, so the gated snare hadn't happened yet. Then April of 79, no, wait a minute, September of 78, Fripp shows up on Blondie's Parallel Lines record, playing some very subtle parts on a song called Fade Away and Radiate. Okay, September 88. About 5-6 months later, April of 79, he's producing a record for the Roaches, simply called The Roaches. Really cool record. And like I said, the Hammond song really showed him in what you might call a pop context, just being so lovely. Our birds are back over here, the baby birds. The baby bird is bigger than its mother at this point. I think she's feeding him too much. Mama, why don't you eat some for yourself? What came after Blondie? Now, I'm not sure when that Gabriel 2 record came out, but I think it was before Blondie, because I'll have to look at where was that recorded. And then in 1979, we have Robert Fripp's Exposure album. And on it, there are these guest vocalists: Gabriel, Daryl Hall, Peter Hamill from Van de Graaff Generator, and so forth. I think maybe one of the Roach sisters sang on it. And then 2 years later, Robert Fripp's got a full-fledged dance band called the League of Gentlemen. Okay, with a drummer and a female bass player, I believe. Sarah Lee, who had come out of the punk movement there in New York. Cool record, it is. I liked it a lot. I like the stupid song titles that seemed overly intellectual for dance music, but this kind of, this yin-yang of opposites and stuff is all over Fripp's canon of work. And then a year later, he's working with another pop star, so to speak, member of the Police, and comes out with a duets record with Andy Summers called I Advance Mask, and I like that record. They did 2 records together, and I can't really remember much from the second one. It didn't stick like the first one. I remember it being less pointy and a little more meandering, which is the same observation I had for the Group 87. Mark Isham and Patrick O'Hearn and those people. Their first record was absolutely fantastic, and then the second one was just, I don't know. It seemed like people were drinking too much Chianti or something. But yeah, the I Advance Mass record, very interesting. Dopey videos, but this was back in the days of MTV when even, Barnes and Barnes Fishhead was getting on there, and the Residents were getting on there, and some really strange music out of England was getting on there and stuff. But anyways, so this is kind of the arc of all of this, and then Fripp's got David Byrne, right? The very unique and singular vocalist. I don't really think of him as a singer. I think of him more as a sort of a vocalist, a poet, a speaker who speaks in pitch. the way that some cool black Southern preachers do. To come in and basically cry out to archangels over Fripp music, which I found very, very interesting. And Under Heavy Manners, for me, was the place where the old Fripp is gone, right? And the new Fripp, which I believe continues. And, you know, many years have passed now, 40-some years, 50 years almost have passed since this coming to New York. Of course, he lives back in England now, probably in his own hometown with his wife of many years. They did an interesting record together long ago. But anyways, you know, he's enjoying the same kind of retirement that a lot of us like me are, where you're still doing music, you're living at home, you're playing it as fast or slow as you wish to, and you know, you feel yourself on the kind of other end of the taper, as it were, and want to get the most out of the years you got left. There's a lot of places in Fripp's music that have just been such a major excitement for me, you know. In fact, the very first time I ever heard something that he played, I didn't even know who he was. An FM station out of Syracuse University in New York, way back in the 70s, 74 or 5, played an Eno tune called Baby's on Fire. And if you haven't heard the guitar solo in that before, I know you probably dug it if you've heard it already in here. It's a ripper. And I remember talking to a friend of mine and saying, I heard the strangest song on the radio with an amazing guitar solo, and my friend was like, oh, I know what that is. And that was the friend that turned me on to Crimson in the first place. And I think the first record he put on was Wake Up Poseidon, not their first album. But yeah, so there's kind of my long arc, observing a long arc of a musician who's, to me, just very interesting, very interesting. I love his use of what you might call composite effects, various ways to, like the trains of a car, right? Hooking things up in a way so that you can take that sound of the instrument you've chosen to play and get it to become what you need it to sound like, what you're hearing in your mind. And Fripp, for me, was a wonderful, you know, distant mentor, one of so many men and women over the years that have basically done something in a way that I thought was remarkably intelligent. I really liked the way it tasted in my ears and brain. And these kind of people gave me the permissions I always talk about to not be afraid to do the kind of music that's inside of me and feeling a little shy, you know, and to use my instrument in ways that aren't shy. So thanks to Robt Fripp for all of that. You're just one of these guys on my road that have been very helpful along the way here. And I hope people keep digging what you're doing and, you know, helping you buy groceries by purchasing your product and stuff. And God bless you, man. All right, I'm out.